Did you know that not all Greek gods were grand, revered, and full of heroic stories? Many of them were actually seen with a certain disdain, or even as jokes by the Greeks themselves. It's curious to think that while Zeus was throwing lightning from Olympus and Athena was strategizing for battles, there were gods like Priapus, with his comical image, or Koalamos, the god of stupidity, who make us question where the line between the sacred and the ridiculous lies. Perhaps you've never heard of these clumsy gods of Olympus, but believe me, they have much more to teach us than it seems at first glance. If you're tired of hearing the same old stories about heroes and powerful gods, get ready for a new perspective. Here, we explore the gods that no one took seriously but who, in a way, represent the more human and even ironic side of Greek mythology. And what if I told you that these gods might be more relevant to the modern world than Zeus or Poseidon? Chaos, the god of primordial emptiness, is a fascinating yet curiously underrated figure in Greek mythology. While other deities emerge with great feats and dramatic stories, Chaos simply exists. He doesn't have epic battles or heroic acts, just the creation of the primordial gods. To many, this may seem insignificant, but think about it. Without Chaos, nothing would have come to be. He represents the beginning of everything, the silence before the great noise of life. When you stop to reflect, you might even compare this figure to the moment when the mind is empty, ready to generate great ideas. By the way, have you ever tried to just stop and let your thoughts flow without rushing? Emptiness is often the starting point for creation. On the other hand, this same absence of action makes chaos go unnoticed, especially when compared to other gods full of personality, like Ares or Poseidon. It's like that moment in life when stillness and space are necessary for something grand to happen, but no one recognizes the value of that time of preparation. Even so, chaos remains there, invisible but essential, like the backdrop of a great work of art that is never remembered. And speaking of lesser-known deities, another equally mysterious and somewhat discreet figure is the goddess of fresh water, Test. Shall we get to know her? The goddess Test, unlike the major Greek deities, lives in the shadow of the more well-known figures. She isn't the protagonist of great battles or epic dramas, but her role as the goddess of fresh water is essential in a much subtler way. Fresh water is a symbol of renewal, purity, and life, something that, while often unnoticed, is vital for survival. Imagine an ancient warrior, exhausted after battle, finding relief in a simple fresh water spring. That is Test, present in moments of need and calm, without seeking the spotlight. In your life, how many times have you found yourself in the same situation? That moment of pause, where something seemingly small makes all the difference. On the other hand, Test is also remembered as the mother of heroes, especially during the Trojan War. What's interesting here is how, despite being a lesser-known figure, her influence spreads through her descendants. It's a perfect example of how sometimes true strength lies not in one's own deeds, but in the future generations one carries. Perhaps it's a lesson for us. The impact we leave isn't always immediately visible, but like Test, it can echo through our actions, even if quietly. Now, leaving the calm waters behind, let's explore the story of a slightly more curious figure, the god of bees, Aristeus. Aristeus, the god of bees, is one of those figures that goes unnoticed in the vast Greek pantheon. However, his passion for bees and honeymaking carries a deep meaning. He wasn't just a god, but also an example of dedication, even when life wasn't kind to him. His story is marked by tragedies, but also by unwavering determination. Beekeeping may seem like a trivial detail to many, but think about how essential these small insects are for the balance of the ecosystem, pollination, and food production. Aristeus reminds us that even amid challenges, there is beauty and importance in the small things we often overlook. However, Aristeus's life was not easy. After losing loved ones, he lived tormented by his pain, but he never abandoned his love for bees. This parallel can be drawn to the lives of many who, even in the face of great difficulties, find in their dedication to something simple a way to cope with suffering. It's almost like an invitation to all of us to look at the details that give meaning to our existence, no matter how small they may seem. And so, while Aristeus tends to the bees, other figures in Greek mythology care for things that affect us in more everyday ways, like hygiene, as we will see with the goddess Hygeia. Hygeia, the daughter of Asclepius, the god of healing, is one of the Greek deities whose role is often forgotten, but whose influence follows us every day. As the goddess of hygiene, she symbolizes something that may seem ordinary but is fundamental to health and well-being. From daily habits, like washing hands or keeping the environment clean, to practices that prevent the spread of diseases, Hygeia teaches us that taking care of the body is a sacred act. Imagine, for instance, how the simple habit of personal hygiene has saved lives throughout history, such as during pandemics when knowledge of hygiene made all the difference. Though Hygeia doesn't have the prestige of warrior or powerful gods, her impact is constant, discreet, and essential. It's curious to think how, in the midst of chaos and disease, Hygeia's presence represents calm, cleanliness, and prevention. She may seem like a minor figure, but like the goddess of fresh water, her importance is only noticed when things go out of control. And, if we think about it, hygiene isn't just physical but also mental. And the balance between body and mind is something that prepares us for what's to come. And speaking of imbalance, who better to exemplify that than the god of drunkenness, Silenus? Let's discover his story. Silenus, the god of drunkenness, is a figure who challenges the boundaries between pleasure and excess. Unlike Dionysus, who represents celebration and wine as a source of joy, Silenus embodies the darker side of drunkenness. He makes us think about how excess can easily spiral out of control. Imagine a feast where the wine flows freely. At first, it's all laughter and relaxation, but little by little, the fine line between fun and chaos is crossed. Silenus is there, humorously warning us about the consequences of letting pleasures take over our lives. How many times have you seen someone lose control over something that, at first, seemed harmless? However, there's also a deeper side to Silenus, as he symbolizes how humanity often seeks to escape its pain and responsibilities. Drunkenness, in its many forms, is not just a physical escape but also an emotional one. The imbalance he represents serves as a reminder that when we don't find healthy ways to deal with our struggles, we can end up drowning in excess. Silenus's lesson is clear. Pleasure can be good, but excess is destructive. And speaking of imbalances and fusions, the next god has a unique story about that. Hermaphroditus, the hermaphrodite god. Let's get to know this unique figure of mythology. Hermaphroditus is undoubtedly one of the most intriguing figures in Greek mythology. The child of Hermes and Aphrodite, his story takes an unexpected turn when, after an encounter with the nymph Salmachus, their bodies merge into one, creating the figure we know today as the hermaphrodite. This fusion of genders, besides being fascinating, carries a powerful message about identity and duality. Hermaphroditus reminds us that human nature is often not as simple as labels suggest. In a world where expectations of who we are can be limiting, his existence challenges the idea that we need to be one way or another. This balance between the masculine and the feminine also reflects how complex we are as human beings. Hermaphroditus, like many of us, doesn't easily fit into rigid categories. And this ambiguity can be seen in how he is remembered in mythology. Neither fully one nor the other, but a bit of both. It's interesting to think about how, today, many people are beginning to break free from conventions and embrace a more fluid identity. Mythology, though ancient, already showed us that we don't need to be confined by limiting definitions. And while Hermaphroditus challenged these norms, the god of beans, Kuranos, was certainly a symbol of something more peculiar. Let's explore this unusual figure. Kuranos, the god of beans, is a curious example of how the Greeks attributed divinity to seemingly mundane aspects of life. Although it may seem comical at first glance, Kuranos represented something deeper than just food. Beans, being one of the most cultivated and consumed foods in ancient Greece, symbolized fertility and abundance. Devotion to this god reveals how central cultivation and agriculture were to daily life. Imagine a devoted farmer who, year after year, depends on a prosperous harvest to support his family. Kuranos would be there, silent but essential, ensuring the cycle of life continues. Additionally, Kuranos makes us reflect on how even the simplest aspects of existence have their value and place in the grand scheme of things. In a world where deities like Zeus and Athena ruled Olympus with great feats, Kronos represented the power of constancy, routine, and simplicity. Just as in everyday life, small habits, like tending to a crop or maintaining a self-care routine, can bring extraordinary results. And speaking of peculiar gods, the next figure is undoubtedly one of the most comical and, at the same time, reflective. Olympus, the god of stupidity. Let's dive into his story. Olympus, the god of stupidity, is a deity that makes us laugh and reflect at the same time. Although he seems like a comical figure, his existence brings to light an unsettling truth about humanity. We all, at some point, fall into the trap of foolishness. Olympus is the one who reminds us of the moments when we believed in something absurd, like the fake news that circulates today. He is the mirror of our flaws and our tendency to be deceived by what seems easy or convenient. But unlike other deities, he doesn't punish. His presence is almost a cosmic joke that warns us not to take everything too seriously. However, there's something comforting about knowing that even the gods had room for absurdity. Olympus personifies the most human part of the pantheon, showing us that making mistakes is part of the journey. He's a reminder that instead of condemning ourselves for our errors, we should learn from them and move forward. Perhaps that's why he's remembered lightly, without great tragedies or punishments. After all, who hasn't done something foolish in life? And speaking of comical yet somewhat scandalous figures, it's time to meet Priapus, the god of erections, whose story is filled with obscene legends and peculiar humor. Let's delve into this unusual figure. Priapus, the god of erections, is a figure that combines the comical with the scandalous. Often represented in an exaggerated and even grotesque way, he was worshipped in gardens and fields as a deity associated with fertility and male sexuality. His peculiar image, with a disproportionate phallus, was used to scare off crop thieves, like a kind of divine scarecrow. The humor in his story comes precisely from this exaggerated and somewhat embarrassing representation, but at the same time, there was an implicit respect in his worship. He reminds us that even in embarrassing matters, there is purpose and function. Imagine, for instance, how laughter can be a powerful tool to break the ice in difficult situations. Despite his jocular nature, Priapus also symbolizes the human desire for abundance and prosperity, especially regarding fertility. He serves as a reminder that the ancient Greeks didn't separate sexuality from daily life. Both were part of a natural cycle. Priapus may seem like a joke, but he reveals something profound about how ancient cultures dealt with the sacred and the profane, the serious and the ridiculous. And so, amid laughter and embarrassment, we conclude our journey through these lesser-known and absurd gods of Olympus, figures who, though not taken seriously, had their place in the rich tapestry of Greek mythology. After learning about these gods, can you see how even the most absurd ones have something to teach? What we can take away from figures like Olympus and Priapus is that, in our lives, often the ridiculous, the mistake, and even the unexpected play crucial roles. How are you dealing with the mistakes and unexpected situations in your daily life? Are you laughing at your own failures or condemning yourself for them? Just as the Greeks learned from these gods, perhaps it's time for you to also look at challenges and uncomfortable moments with a different perspective. After all, who said life always has to be taken so seriously? So, how about subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications? That way, you can keep learning more about the myths and lessons mythology can teach us, not just about the heroes, but about the more human side of the gods. Let's explore together what's hidden behind the stories that, at first glance, seem merely funny, but in reality hold much more depth.